Before The Little Mermaid or The Snow Queen, Hans Christian Andersen's very first published fairy tale was a violent, bizarre story about a soldier, a witch, and a magical tinderbox that summons giant-eyed dogs to destroy a royal court. It's called The Tinderbox, and it was the opening story in his very first booklet of fairy tales, published in 1835. And its roots go much deeper than you think. A soldier, marching home from war, meets a hideous old witch on the road. She offers him riches if he climbs into a hollow tree. Inside, he'll find 3 treasure rooms, each guarded by monstrous dogs, one with eyes like teacups, one with eyes like mill wheels, and one with eyes as big as towers. If you place them on my blue-checked apron, the witch says, they won't hurt you. The soldier agrees. In the first room, he takes copper coins. In the second, he tosses them for silver. In the third, he drops the silver for gold, so much he stuffs his pockets, boots, knapsack, and hat. As he prepares to climb out, the witch reminds him, don't forget the tinderbox. He fetches it, but when she refuses to say why it matters, he draws his sword and cuts off her head. Then he ties up the gold in her apron and heads to town. At first, life is good, fancy clothes, fine food, and charity for the poor. But soon the gold runs out, and no one visits the poor soldier in his attic room anymore. One night, cold and broke, he remembers the witch's tinderbox. When he strikes it, the dog with teacup eyes appears. What do you wish, master? With each strike, once, twice, 3 times, he can summon a dog from each treasure room. He becomes rich again, and curious, especially about the princess, locked in a copper castle because of a prophecy. She'll marry a common soldier. The king forbids anyone from seeing her, so the soldier sent the dog to bring the princess to him. It was midnight. In the silence of the royal castle, the great black dog leapt through the shadows and returned with the princess asleep on his back. She looked so peaceful, so impossibly beautiful, that the soldier couldn't help himself. He leaned in and kissed her. The dog took her back before morning, and when the princess awoke, she spoke of a strange dream, of riding on a dog's back, of drifting through the air, and of a soldier's kiss. The queen, clever and suspicious, grew uneasy. Dreams, she knew, often carried traces of truth. So the next night, she placed one of her old court ladies in the princess's room to keep watch. The dog came again, and the old woman, careful and quick, followed silently behind. As the dog carried the sleeping princess away, the court lady crept through the quiet streets until she reached the house where the soldier lived. There she pulled a piece of chalk from her cloak and marked a large white X on the door. In the morning, she triumphantly led the king and queen and their guards to the marked house, only to find that every single door in town had a chalk X on it. The dog had seen the trick and outwitted her, but the queen was not done. On the third night, she tied a small silk bag filled with buckwheat flour around the princess's neck. She cut a tiny hole in it so that as the dog carried her off again, a fine trail of flour spilled onto the ground, marking the exact path. At sunrise, they followed the trail through the streets, through courtyards and alleys, straight to the soldier's door. He was arrested on the spot. The people whispered in the streets. The king was furious, and the sentence was swift. The soldier was to be hanged at dawn. He sat in prison with nothing but a small barred window above him. He watched as the crowds gathered in the streets, the gallows were raised, and the drumbeats echoed in the square. But just as hope seemed lost, a shoemaker's boy came running past the prison. The soldier called out to him, "Lad, run to the inn where I stayed. Bring me my tinderbox, and I'll give you 4 shillings." The boy ran as fast as he could. The sun rose, the executioner prepared the rope, and just before the final moment, the soldier spoke. "They say a condemned man may have one last request. I only ask for a moment to smoke one last pipe." The king, watching from his throne, allowed it. The soldier struck the tinderbox once, then twice, then a third time. and in a flash of fire and fury, all three dogs appeared. The dog with teacup-sized eyes, the dog with mill-wheel eyes, and the giant, monstrous dog with eyes like spinning towers. They tore through the royal guards. They flung the judges high into the air and smashed them down again. They leapt toward the king and queen, and in seconds, the monarchy was no more. The crowd, once horrified, now cheered. "The soldier shall be our king," they cried. "He is brave, he is clever, and he commands the dogs." So the soldier was placed in the royal carriage. The beautiful princess came out of the copper castle and agreed to marry him, perhaps not entirely unwillingly, given how often she had been taken to him in sleep. The wedding was grand and full of celebration. Musicians played, flags flew, and food flowed freely. And at the head of the table sat the new king, the princess at his side. With the three enormous dogs seated around them, their eyes ever watchful and their loyalty unquestioned. The Tinderbox was one of Andersen's first published fairy tales in 1835, and while it draws from oral tradition, the voice, tone, and moral ambiguity are distinctly his. The Tinderbox appeared alongside three other tales in Andersen's debut: Big Claus and Little Claus, The Princess and the Pea, and Little Ida's Flowers. Andersen claimed many of these were based on stories he'd heard growing up in Odense, Denmark. But while the structure of the Tinderbox comes from folk tradition, his voice, dark, ironic, and quietly subversive, was already present. This particular story draws heavily from an older tale you might recognize, Aladdin. In fact, the Danish poet Adam Oehlenschläger had dramatized Aladdin the same year Andersen was born. And the parallels are obvious. A poor young man gains a magical object. The object summons supernatural helpers. He wins gold, a princess, and power. And at one point, even risks losing it all. The magical object, the Tinderbox, was a common item in Andersen's time, used to strike fire before matches existed. By turning it into a tool of ultimate power, he elevated something mundane into something mythic. It's rough around the edges, a little absurd and a little violent, but that was Andersen's charm from the beginning. The soldier isn't noble in the traditional sense, but he's bold, decisive, and unforgettable. He returns from war with nothing, survives a witch, tricks a kingdom, and ends up on the throne. With the princess at his side and three enormous dogs as his royal guard. It's chaotic, it's clever, and it's the very first time Andersen let us know, in his stories, anything can happen, and the underdog just might win it all. If you enjoy fairy tales with a twist, where we retell the classics and explore the deeper meaning behind the magic, subscribe to this channel. We unpack stories from Andersen, the Grimms, mythology, folklore, and beyond, because the old tales still have something to say. Let's uncover it, one story at a time.